Good to go.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to the Beaufort Regional Chamber's virtual town hall with State Representative Nancy Mace. Nancy is running for the U.S. House of Representatives representing South Carolina District 1. She's a Low Country native, a citizen. She currently serves in the South Carolina House in seat District 99. That's representing parts of Charleston and Berkeley County, including Daniel and Mount Pleasant. I know her through our work together and service together on the Charleston Association of Realtors Legislative Affairs Committee for a number of years, where she was a frequent friend of the realtor community and the business community in the greater Charleston region. We're so appreciative of having you join the Beaufort Regional Chamber for this morning's call. We've got 30 minutes to get some questions from chamber members out on the line, but we wanted to open up with just some background on you, why you're running, and some of your top issues.
Of course. And can you hear me okay, Ian? Because I'm kind of cutting in and out a little bit on my side. I just want to make sure if I need to get on a different Wi-Fi. With the kids homeschooling during the day, all the devices online, sometimes it slows my internet down. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, super. That would be great. And thank you again for the opportunity to host this town hall this morning. I'm very excited about this election this year. So far in the last week or so, we've had two debates. The first one was in Beaufort last week, and then the second one was in Charleston last night, and those can be viewed online. If you had asked me 25 years ago, if you had said that I would be the Republican nominee running for Congress in my hometown, since I grew up in the Low Country, I would have called you crazy. 25 years ago, I was 17 and I experienced a traumatic event in my life, and I dropped out of high school. And I quit on myself. I quit on life, and I'm the daughter of a retired Army general, and I'm the daughter of a retired school teacher. And my parents said, if you're going to stop going to school, or certainly you're going to start going to work. And I had many jobs growing up, but one of my first jobs as a teenager was as a waitress at the Waffle House on College Park Road, which when you're coming into Charleston is exit 203, right off the interstate. And I used to stand on a piece of duct tape about a foot long, 12 inches wide, and I would yell to the cooks in the back how my customers wanted their hash browns, which was smothered, covered, and chunked always. And I learned some very tough lessons during some very tough times in my life. And while I was a waitress and while I had all these other jobs, I learned about the value of hard work. And I learned about the value of finishing a task, setting a goal, and completing it. And the principal of my high school just so happened to be a graduate of the Citadel. And he offered me 3 chances. He said I can come back to school, and I wasn't going to go back to school. Going back was not an option. Second, he said I could sit for the GED, and I heard test, which to a 17-year-old is like a 4-letter word. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that either. But he set up an opportunity or program at Trident Technical College in North Charleston. And I was able to finish my high school diploma by taking college courses. And those of you that have children that are older or high school students or in college, that's called dual enrollment today. But back in the mid-90s, they didn't have that in Berkeley County where I grew up. And my principal of my high school saw something in me that I didn't see. And he gave me a second chance. And as I look back and reflect on my 42 years of life, my life has been a series of second chances. And the Low Country has given me so much opportunity that serving the Low Country is an opportunity really for me to give back. And that was in 1995. And in 1996, that's when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the majority opinion in June of 1996 against a Supreme Court lawsuit against the Virginia Military Institute that said, if you are a government-funded college or university or higher education institution, that you couldn't discriminate based on gender. And that ruling literally changed my life. It saved my life because that evening on the day that ruling came down, the Citadel decided that they would allow women in for the first time in its history on its own accord. And that was a Wednesday night. And I grew up in Goose Creek and was still living in Goose Creek at the time. And I drove down to campus to pick up an application on Thursday. The very next day, I called in sick to work. On Friday, I turned it in because back in those days, it was a sheet of paper, front and back, maybe at most. And on Monday, the school had called me and said I'd been tentatively accepted. And I didn't go to the Citadel to be the first. I went because my father is a graduate of the Citadel. He served 28 years in the United States Army. He's seen 3 tours of combat, and he's someone I admire tremendously. And I went to the Citadel because I had something to prove to myself. I also had something to prove to my family and to my parents, that I could go to a place, that I could face adversity, that I could face obstacles unlike any other I'd faced in my life, and that I could achieve, that I could succeed. And that if I set a goal, that I could be successful. And for me, I had this personal chip on my shoulder. I had something to prove to myself and to the world, that I could go into the gauntlet and that I could survive. And that experience taught me so much about life and about me personally. And it's helped me in business over the last 21 years, and it's helped as a state lawmaker. But I learned about having courage to speak up, not only for yourself, but having the courage to speak up for others. Giving a voice to the voiceless is so important to serving in our communities right now. And also learned about having confidence, because if we don't believe in ourselves, then no one is going to believe in us. And having that confidence has helped me be successful in business. I have experience starting my own businesses and companies. I've worked in the technology space for a very long time and had some of the top tier financial services clients in the industry when I was in technology. It gave me the confidence to be the mom that I am today, and also the confidence to run for office. So 3 years ago, I ran in a special election for State House District 99, which is Charleston and Berkeley County. I represent 4 towns and 4 mayors within that district. And I love the job that I'm doing today. I've done a lot in a very short period of time in my service in the state house. And because of my background in business and in real estate, and being someone who's gone through the public education system, I've had a lot of experience in bringing that to the table to get things done. And I've even done a lot of things that Democrats and politicians only talk about doing. This year is an unprecedented year. I think every one of us want 2020 to be over, myself included. Between COVID-19 and unemployment issues that we're facing, small business issues, health issues, education, these things are weigh on us enormously right now. But one of the things, when we talk about George Floyd and some of the social issues that is causing some of the civil unrest and the rioting and protesting that's happening, and those are 2 separate things. I respect everyone's right to free speech in the first place. I respect everyone's right to protest, and they should be angry. I won't tolerate violence or looting or rioting and those kinds of things. But for about 4 months ago or so, a few months ago, the governor signed my prison reform bill into law. And so as a Republican, I've worked on a lot of these issues that people want to see change in today, whether that's criminal justice reform. I've worked on it as a lawmaker, prison reform. I've had legislation signed into law. Women's issues, I've been an advocate for women who are victims of rape and incest and domestic violence for a very long time. I've also been an advocate for small businesses as well. With my background in business, I believe it's really important that South Carolina continues to have the soil conditions so that companies can start up, grow, and thrive, because we all know with the growth that we're seeing across the low country, especially in Beaufort County, when folks visit, they never want to leave because it's such a beautiful place to live, work, and retire. And that's what everybody wants when they come here. And unemployment is a big thing. The economy right now is huge. South Carolina is doing a much better job than other states. And I think that's because we've had pro-business, pro-growth, and low taxes. So right now, the unemployment rate nationally is about 8.4%. And our August unemployment rates here across the state of South Carolina is about 6.3. It's roughly the same. It varies per county within South Carolina's 1st congressional district. But overall, we're doing a much better job than other states and across the board nationally. As someone who's started a company before and someone who grew up here when this whole thing started, one of the things that I was advocating for We did this right after Hurricane Hugo in September of 1989, but we allowed small businesses to write off their losses immediately following that disaster. And I really have been advocating for that because the stimulus package, as you all know, allowed small businesses to write off their losses, but not until next year. And, I've seen figures as high as 25 to 60% of small businesses that were shut down during COVID-19 are never going to be able to reopen again. And so I've been a real advocate trying to be a voice for those companies that really need relief, that didn't get access to PPP in the first go round. There's still $131 billion out there that we need to help small businesses get the resources they need to survive and to make it through the remainder of the year. Healthcare is another big issue, something that I've worked on. When COVID-19 started, the governor, as part of his emergency orders, he lifted something called their certificate of need here in South Carolina, which is a burdensome regulation across 23 components of our healthcare industry. One of them including it would limit the cap or limit the number of acute hospital beds in hospitals. It would limit the number of beds in nursing homes. But he lifted those regulations temporarily. Well, previous to COVID-19, I've actually authored legislation that would remove those burdensome regulations for our healthcare market permanently. We don't need to have if we want to react to COVID-19 faster, we've got to lift and remove a lot of the regulations that are inhibiting us as a state, as a nation, and as a community in our healthcare and hospital community. A lot of those regulations have inhibited us from reacting faster. One of the other things I've been advocating for since COVID started was widespread rapid testing. We've seen a lot of innovation in healthcare during COVID-19, and if we can get widespread rapid testing throughout the state, throughout the nation, we'll be able to better identify hotspots throughout the country. One of the things that South Carolina has done, we've been following the CDC guidelines. Our residents have been good about wearing their masks and socially distancing even when they're at work. We're one of 3 states, it was announced 2 days ago, where our numbers are actually going down, where a lot of regions across the country right now are seeing a renewal or a second wave. Our numbers are actually on the decline. And if we continue to trust each other to make the right decision and do the things we need to keep each other safe, we can continue to open our businesses along as we move forward, as long as those numbers are stable and continue to decline. And so we've done a great amount of work as a business community, as a state, to ensure that those numbers stay where they are. And then infrastructure is another one that's very important. With all of the folks that are moving here, 30 to 50 people a day, depending on what statistics you read, our development has gotten behind our infrastructure. And infrastructure is something that I've worked on as a state lawmaker. It's really important that we have an ally in Washington that will fight for revenue to come here. One of the things that I would love to do as a freshman lawmaker would be to sit on T&I, or the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, so I can work to get the resources and money that we need, the funding we need to keep our roads and bridges and to maintain them and to build them new where we need them. We have enormous needs because we're a beach and coastal community where the salt air and salt water, it's much more expensive to maintain our infrastructure needs now more than ever because of the environment. And speaking of the environment, contrary to some of the negative ads, or a lot of the negative ads on TV, those aren't my legs on the beach. I don't want drilling off our coast. As someone who grew up here, I'm a conservationist. I even make dirt in my backyard. I compost and I garden. And the very first bill I ever filed as a state lawmaker was against offshore drilling. And the very first rally I ever spoke at was against offshore drilling. I've stood shoulder to shoulder, with Congressman Cunningham against seismic testing even. And this is an issue where Republicans and Democrats can really come together on. And I'm proud of the bipartisan record that I've had working for small businesses, working for women, working for minorities in our community, working to lower taxes. I have 100% record of lowering taxes. And in 2019, I earned the Taxpayer Hero Award for that record, and I've pledged never to raise them. And so all of these things are very important to ensuring that our business climate is successful here as we move forward, as we continue to improve from the economic shutdown from COVID-19. And as we work together to improve our community and quality of life, I know this is something we can do together, and I have a very strong bipartisan record of doing that. I'm ranked the 4th most fiscally conservative member of South Carolina's General Assembly. But like with my prison reform bill, I have a very strong record of actually reaching across the aisle to get something done. When my prison bill was signed into law, not a single Republican or Democrat voted against it. And I'm very proud of that record, because that's what it's going to take to move forward in this country. There's so much division and ugly behavior happening on our streets, in our communities, in our hometowns, across the country, that it's really important that we have someone who's willing to work with others, regardless of their political affiliation. That's something I'm very proud of that I've worked on with my record. With that, I would like to take your questions this morning and appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you all directly today.
Representative Mace, thank you so much for a thorough recap. You touched on a lot of issues that are sure to be music to the business community in Beaufort's ears, from regulation to taxes to infrastructure. One topic that's certainly on everybody's minds in the Beaufort-Port Royal region right now is defense. It's $2.4 billion annual economic impact for this part of the Low Country. The impact in Charleston, in fact, is even greater. For Beaufort, it's 19,000 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we've been dealing with a lot of media attention and speculation over the future of Parris Island. You've jumped into some of that. What would you do as an elected official to help ensure that our defense budget is fully funded and that Parris Island is meeting the future defense national security needs and is well positioned to exist into the future?
Very important. And yeah, I'm the daughter of someone who served for 28 years in our military. My family, and in fact, today I have family deployed overseas right now. The majority of my family are either active duty serving or retired military veterans today. And it's something that's very personal to me. I've seen, because my father was exposed to Agent Orange, I've seen his lifelong health struggles because of that, navigating the VA. I've witnessed this, I've grown up with this. And when I read in the Military Times recently about the Marine Corps commandant, the commandant of the Marine Corps, saying that Parris Island was on the chopping block, and I did some research to see what actually happened. How could this be? Because as you said, thousands of jobs, billions of dollars to our economy would be affected if Parris Island shut down, not to mention the military history. Beaufort has such a rich military history of many retirees, military veterans that retire there, and the economic impact, the job losses we're going to have, the economic impact that it will have. Well, this happened on Congressman Cunningham's watch. So in the US Senate, when the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, was passed out of the US Senate, Parris Island was not mentioned in the first vote of the bill. And so Senator Graham and Senator Scott would not have been aware of any issue with Parris Island. When the bill got to the House, it was amended by Jackie Spears in California, amending it in a way that talked about gender equality and integrating men, women, and transgenders, and under a certain amount of time. And the Marine Corps Commandant recently said in Military Times that Parris Island would not be able to meet those requirements in the time frame allotted in the NDAA, thusly putting Parris Island and those jobs and that on the chopping block. And so we had a debate last night about this issue, and there's only one representative that represents this area, and that's Congressman Cunningham. And when Parris Island was put into the bill, it happened in the House on his watch. The only people I'm loyal to as a state lawmaker and would be in Congress is the 1st Congressional District, the people that live and work here, a place where I grew up and a place where I call home. My loyalty lies here, and I'm not going to make the mistake of missing literally one of the most important military bases, not only in South Carolina, but in the country. We have such a rich history at Parris Island down here. I wouldn't make that mistake of missing it. The NDAA is a huge bill. And there's no reason why other congressmen who don't represent the district that Parris Island resides in, there's no reason why they would be responsible for that. So I think it's really important that we have someone who can represent our interests, who will put the low country first, will put our jobs and our economy first, especially now with COVID-19 and the struggles that we are facing. If we lost Parris Island, all those businesses, the tourism, the restaurants, the hotels, I mean, everything in that community just is depleted. And so I'm always going to put our soldiers and our citizens first right here in the Low Country. And I can promise you that when it comes to military issues and business issues, it's really personal because I've done that. I've been there. I grew up in a military family, and it's important that we have someone who's going to protect those.
Well, thank you for speaking on certainly one of the biggest topics for everybody in the Low Country right now. I'd love to open it up to questions if there are any from the audience. I see one via chat. Representative Mace, you've said a lot about your support for small business, which is fantastic. This is from Hope Freeman. She's on the Chamber's board, which has been focused on diversification of our economy and support for manufacturing. She writes, as you know, I work for BP, which is a large manufacturing facility with hundreds of employees and their families in the 1st Congressional District. Can you speak to your support or to your plans for support for manufacturing and industrial recruitment efforts that are already existing in the Low Country?
Right. We have a great, as you say, Hope, and they're a great question. We have a great manufacturing footprint here in South Carolina, but especially in the Low Country. And as many of you read recently, Boeing 787 is coming to the Low Country. And with that, because we're a right to work state, I think it's really important that we continue to enact policies that support our businesses who want to grow in our manufacturing space and support employees. But we've got to ensure that we keep our taxes low so that when companies do come here, that there are benefits not only for them as a business, as a manufacturing company, but for their distributors and the suppliers, but also for their employees. I voted to lower taxes 100% of the time for South Carolinians. I think it's really important that the state as a whole lowers the state income tax. That would be helpful. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2 or 3 years ago really benefited this region. And if you look at our unemployment figures for manufacturing, really every industry in the Low Country in South Carolina's 1st Congressional District, previous to COVID-19, because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, our unemployment rate throughout the district was just under 2%. And so we've got to make sure that we have a fiscal conservative who will vote that way and ensure that we keep our taxes low. With the 787 coming to the Low Country, that's also going to bring all those suppliers in the market, because this will be the only place that the 787 will be manufactured. That is a huge opportunity for Charleston. But one of the other things that we need to do, especially when it comes to diversification, we can't talk about this issue without talking about education. And I think it's really important that we as a state ensure that we educate our students that they can read and do math by 3rd grade. So by the time they get to middle school, they're prepared for high school, because if they're not prepared by middle school, by the 6th or 7th grade, they won't be successful when they graduate from high school. And I believe it's really important for us at the federal and state level to ensure that we invest, that we spend more money in the classroom than we do on bureaucrats, to ensure that our folks who grew up here, when they do graduate from high school, they get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, that they have the qualifications necessary in order to get a job. I think it's really important that we give opportunities to people who are here. One of the things that I've worked on as a state lawmaker is getting work certificates, getting high school diplomas for people who weren't able to finish school, particularly for those who are adults over the age of 21. That's something I've drafted legislation on and have tried to build partnerships with, say, like a Trident Technical College and a Palmetto Goodwill, where they could work together to ensure that people that got lost in the education system could get back into it as an adult, but also at the same time get childcare and also get work certificates to help them earn a higher level of income over their lifetime. But I think there are multiple ways we have to tackle that issue, and that's something that is really near and dear to my heart and something I've worked on as a state lawmaker.
During your opening comments, you brought up infrastructure, which is certainly a big need for across the Low Country. Connectivity is particularly vital for us, our ways in and out. also, for people visiting, but also for trade. Does the federal government have a bigger role to play than they currently do in supporting infrastructure investment, including roads and infrastructure for flooding?
Certainly. So flooding is a huge issue. As a state lawmaker, I drafted a bill, and you might even be familiar with this bill on LIDAR radar that would map the entire state of South Carolina to look at that specific issue for flooding. If we can't identify where the problem starts and why it's happening or where the flooding is coming from, then we can't have solutions for that. And those might be environmental, those might be development issues. We've had a lot of overdevelopment. Our development's got ahead of our infrastructure needs. Overdevelopment has caused flooding. Obviously, climate change has caused flooding as well. I know in Charleston, at least downtown, when you visit the peninsula, we also have a man-made problem because part of the peninsula was built on landfill. And so while sea levels are rising, they're also sinking. So the federal government does have a role. One of the first things I did as a state lawmaker was join the Seawall Coalition, which is now the American Flood Coalition, which helps individuals and states and companies find the resources that they need to help them with their flooding issues. Also, I mentioned earlier, if I could pick any committee to be on as a freshman lawmaker in DC, it would be the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I want to go up there and fight for the resources that we need. We live on the coast. We live in beach communities where the cost to maintain and build a road or a bridge is significantly more expensive than it is when you're inland, on the inland part of the state. And so that's something that would have an enormous positive consequence for us as a district if we were able to do that. And that's my number one priority in terms of committees, would be to get on T&I as a freshman.
If you had to pick a second committee, and I'm really glad to hear you say transportation infrastructure, but if you had to pick a second one that was your top priority to get on, what would the second committee be?
Financial services. I also love the idea of getting on, asking for a seat on the Veteran Affairs Committee as well. That's another one. I'm tied. If there's a number two, I mean, those two are tied. But financial services, again, having a background in business, I've been in business for 21 years. That's a place where I would also like to have a seat and have a voice and have some input on legislation that comes through committee. It's really important that we have someone that understands how that works and has experience in business and can bring that to the table.
Well, we're approaching the hour, or the top of the hour. You touched on your philosophy on taxes. We've talked about offshore drilling. We've talked about committees. We've talked about defense and infrastructure, which ticked most of the biggest topics I had on my list. I would invite any other questions from folks on the call. You've got a diverse group of business folks on the call. Are there any from anybody who, anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to hear about from Representative Mace?
Hey, Ian, what about affordable housing? Representative Mace, I'm in Charleston. Ian brought me down to Beaufort. I'm from Beaufort, and affordable housing for the huge dependence on the tourism industry is becoming more and more of a problem, not just here in the peninsula in Charleston, but practically everyone is coming off the island for Hilton Head, and it's a growing problem in Beaufort. How can you help from the federal level?
Right. Well, I think that, from that perspective, it is more expensive now than ever. And I see it here on Daniel Island. I could never afford to live where I am today if I were buying right now. It would be impossible to do so. But particularly, as you mentioned, for the tourism industry, for hotspots, Hilton Head and Charleston, it is a huge problem. I like the idea of giving incentives for developers when they are developing, whether it's a multifamily piece of property, single family or mixed use, that we incentivize them to allow a certain percentage of that development to be for affordable housing or workforce housing, and give them some sort of a tax incentive. As a businesswoman, I love the idea of incentivizing good behavior, of incentivizing things that we need and want to have happen. And so if we can implement, and I don't know that would be so much federal, that might be more at the state and local level, and more so the local level, because most of that type of policy is done through ordinances, through municipalities and counties. But I would want to be a leader on that issue, encouraging our cities, our towns, and our counties to develop incentives so that when we are developing property, and I see it on Daniel Island where we have workforce housing here, that was part of the deal as Daniel Island was being developed, that we had affordable housing included on the island as a percentage of the development here. And I think that if we can encourage that to happen in the private sector through ordinances at federal, state, or local level, that is the best way to do it. And we have that sort of partnership between the private sector and public.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, hearing none. Representative Mace, thank you again for spending time with the members of the Beaufort Regional Chamber this morning. Please be safe out on the campaign trail, and best of luck to you in your campaign.
Thank you so much. I just want to say I appreciate each and every one of you for everything that you're doing for our community right now. It's tough. This has been a tough year, and I'm sure we're all going to be glad when it's over, but just thank you for everything that you're doing and leadership you're providing across South Carolina.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll end the call.
Thanks, guys. Have a great morning.